Welcome, everybody. I'm David Rhodes. Welcome to another edition of In the Books from Fire Engineering Books and all the wonderful people at all the fire engineering and Clarion Events brands. I've got two very special guests today, and we're going to be talking about high-rise buildings, understanding the vertical challenges. It's a book that came out about a year ago, and it's just a remarkable work. If you're interested at all in anything to do with high rises, not just firefighting. In this book, you're going to learn how to manage and respond to all hazards events within the high rise environment. You'll dive deep into the cognitive command, what it is and how it plays a role in many high rise cases. And it's a must guide for any fire professional, building owner, the building construction community, system engineers, property managers, and future students of high rise buildings. The authors of this book, very, very, very profound and long line of accomplishments. Gerald Tracy, known as Jerry, FDNY Battalion Chief, retired. Jerry served more than 30 years with the FDNY, retiring as a battalion commander. Assignments began as a firefighter, Engine 90 in the Bronx and Ladder 108 in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. As a lieutenant, he was assigned to Ladder 4 in Midtown Manhattan, and he served as a captain of Tower Ladder 35 on the Upper West Side. He formed and became the first captain of Squad 18. You might have heard of it, a special operations unit, and the only squad company located in Manhattan. Squad 18 responds to every fire and major emergency in the response area of Manhattan. He also developed numerous training programs, as well as refined improving manuals, firefighting policies, and procedures for FDNY. He's authored and co-authored numerous articles for fire engineering with New York firefighters and with other fire service publications, as well as training publications for the FDNY. He was an important catalyst for the research conducted by NIST, UL, and NYU Polytechnic Institute on smoke management and fire behavior in high-rise buildings, emphasizing research with wind-driven fires. He was a keynote speaker at the 2017 FDIC conference and a recipient of the Tom Brennan Lifetime Achievement Award. Welcome, Jerry. And then we've got Jack Murphy. Jack Murphy, Chairman and Life Safety Directors Association of Greater New York and Adjunct Professor at John Jay College Fire Science Institute. Jack Murphy is a retired fire marshal and former deputy chief of the Leona, New Jersey Fire Department. He was appointed deputy fire coordinator for Bergen County. He serves on the NFPA High-Rise Building Safety Advisory Committee, the NFPA 1620 Pre-Incident Planning Committee, and the Fire and Life Safety Directors Committee. He has represented the Northeast IAFC region on Fire Code Action Committee and the International Code Council. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts and Masters of Art in Industry Technology. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Fire Science and an Associate of Arts, Liberal Arts. He also holds a certificate in Security Management. Jack has authored numerous fire service articles as well as a field handbook, Rapid Incident Command Systems. He co-authored many chapters in the Fire Engineering's Handbook, Firefighter 1 and 2. In 1997, he was appointed an FDNY Honorary Battalion Chief. He also serves as a Clarion Fire and Rescue Group FDIC Advisory Board member and is a contributing editor for Fire Engineering Magazine. He also received the Tom Brennan Lifetime Achievement Award. And not with us today, but a very important part of the book is James Murdaugh, FDNY Deputy Chief, served as an Assistant Chief of the Fire Department, City of New York, Commander, Borough of the Bronx, and Commander, Bureau of Training in the 15th Division in Brooklyn. He served as Project Manager for computerization of fire apparatus, fire stations, and personnel records. He also served as Deputy Chief, Bronx 7th Division, 8th Battalion Chief in Midtown Manhattan Commander, Engine 48, the Bronx, Lieutenant, Ladder 4, and 35, Midtown Manhattan. What a group. Welcome, Jerry and Jack. How are you guys doing?
Doing fine.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
And I've been fortunate enough in my career to go back a good ways with both of these fellows. Probably about the same time. Probably met both of you about the same time. Jerry and I were training together with the infamous Tom Brennan and Dan with Stalo.
Danny Noonan.
Both Danny Noonan, and both of them have gone on to greater pastures now. But that's how we met and doing training. That was at least 20 plus years ago. And then Jack through FDIC. Jack was the education director, which is part of what I do now. So long time going, guys. This book is just incredible. It's a one of a kind, and it covers everything from the front door of a high rise to the roof. And I know it took a lot for you guys to put it together, but tell us who had the idea for the book and what was the motivation behind it. Either of you, take it away.
I believe I reached out to both Jack, and Jack suggested we include Jimmy Murtaugh. My incentive to write a book goes back to the days that I was a captain, actually a lieutenant in Fort Truck, Midtown Manhattan, then became captain. And it was because of some tragic events that happened in the history of FDNY, specific to high rise. And they were line of duty deaths. Started back in 96, in Rockaway, when we lost a firefighter by the name of Jimmy Williams. And it was a fire on the third floor of a fireproof multiple dwelling, and it was a wind-driven fire. And that really should have been a wake-up call for FDNY. They did a forensic after-action review, and in reading it, there was only one page of conclusions, and it was 2 paragraphs, and it basically said that if the firefighters would have followed the firefighting procedures as written, the event may not have occurred. And I was shocked because working in Midtown and now responding to high-rise emergencies and fires, I was, let's say, scrutinizing our policies and procedures specific with ventilation and attack and the direct frontal attack. And I was saying to myself that the procedures we were following were brought forth from fires in ordinary construction. I was calling them tenement tactics, and we needed change. And it would be at the FDIC conference in 1996 that I would be introduced to a gentleman from the National Institute of Standard and Technology, Dan Medrikowski. And I got into a conversation with him specific to fire behavior in high rise and also ventilation practices. And I drew his interest right away. And we wanted to perform, let's say, research studies in an actual building rather than a lab, because people would look at lab results and say, well, that's something that you can control, you can, replicate, things like that. And it took us many years, if you will, to acquire a building. And even in that time, and the acquisition of a building would come about in 2006. But in that period of time, we would lose more firefighters to high-rise buildings, also wind-driven events. So it really became a passion for me, if you will. And let's say we could talk about the research, but when I approached Jack about writing a book, it seemed that the planets were aligning, because it was let's say, a perfect fit with Jack's background in fire safety. The fact that he was, on NFPA committees, he understood codes. He was very influential in changing codes in New York City as well. And then when he suggested Jimmy Murtaugh, and I had known him, but I really didn't know him. Mm-hmm. And this collaboration, Jim had brought forth to the book and to us concepts that were unheard of in the fire service. And we'll discuss that as we go through the book. But this collaboration, the three of us, Jack Murphy and Jim Murtaugh, was profound, to say this and comments have been made. And one comment was made by a gentleman by the name of Paul Grimwood, who is well known in the fire service internationally, who went on to become a PhD. He was originally in London, a firefighter in the London Fire Brigade. His comment was that this book is the Bible for the fire service in understanding, let's say, the challenges of fires, responding to fires and emergencies in high rise. So I'm blessed by having these partners of Jack and Jim.
Awesome. Jack, how long did it take you guys to put this collaboration together?
We think 7 years, all together. Jerry and I and Jim spent many hours, like wake up with coffee and get on for like 2-3 hours a day. One thing we do thank COVID, it pushed us along a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it was, like Jerry said, a long time coming. And the thing that makes it unique is you're dealing with outside people who respond to buildings. Then they pulled me in for inside stuff. What do I do inside the building? And to marry that up together, and like Jerry said, it goes beyond the fire service. Building construction, people in construction and property management should know this. Even architects and engineers. It's a collaboration of everything that we've, in more than 100 years between the three of us collectively, have experienced.
I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but there's a review on the fire engineering books page of the book. One of the first reviews is like, the guy says, "I'm not a firefighter. I'm a screenplay writer. And I was working on something and needed to know more about high-rise fires." He goes, "I'm blown away. And I have such a respect for the people who enter these buildings when they're on fire." So yeah, that's probably not our target audience, but obviously it was a huge resource guide to him. But anybody that manages a high-rise building, the building engineers or anybody who's designing a high-rise building, I mean, there's just tons of information in there for everybody. You guys did a great job with that. Tracy?
Well, not only that, there's an enlightenment, if you will. I was privileged to present at John Jay College a little bit more than a week ago at a conference. The title of that conference was The Towering Inferno.
Oh, yeah.
Past, present.
It was the anniversary, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And there was another gentleman presenting, and he's a principal with Thornton Tomasetti, which is really one of the most renowned architectural firms on the planet, if you will, Alia Asharif. And I got his attention with my presentation, and he just contacted me a couple of days ago. He'd like to continue our relationship and conversation, in that meaning that profession, needs to understand our challenges and what can be done to, one, bring the fire service into the future. I was just reading about a building that's being thought of and possibly built and designed in Oklahoma City. It's called the Legends Tower or something like that. But in any event, it's going to be reinforced concrete, and it's going to be a super tall, and they'll be installing sensors in the building that will, let's say, give warning if there's stress put on the building more than it could withstand. Now, that's very interesting, because I'd like to see that go even further with sensors that could provide an incident commander with information such as, okay, is the building being stressed because of being assaulted by fire? Other sensors that could tell us pressure differentials to know where smoke may migrate, concentrations of carbon monoxide to one alert an incident commander where to deploy resources as things are happening. Other than just getting a call that we have people trapped up on the top floor, things like that. So you hear where I'm going with this. So yeah, there's many other entities that really need to understand our challenges because we'll work in collaboration for the future.
Right. Were there, other than the couple of incidents you mentioned, were there any other like key incidents that were like just pushed your motivation level over the top to get this done? Maybe even while you were writing.
I think that for me, a lot of the key incidents is what I call tragic fire codes from these major fires that occur. And they occur every so many years. You start with the Triangle Shirt fire, MGM fire, things of that nature, the recent Bronx fire, with the duplexes and everything. So those things keep popping up. And it isn't just things in the United States. We've taken a global look at things, buildings that collapse. All right. So it's something that we don't want it to be constant. We know that these buildings, they're few and far between for major fires, more residential fires than office buildings, which are two different animals. And we point that out in the book. So we're constantly being challenged. I hate to see tragic fires where codes change. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve on that. And what Jerry's saying, get out in front of these people and say, these are issues. And I'll talk about in chapter 2, code trade-offs. So
awesome. Well, let's dive in here. The book's laid out into 3 parts. Part 1 is understanding the vertical challenge. Part 2, command and firefighting unit responses. And part 3, erecting a skyscraper and looking ahead to new designs and technology. So, Jerry, why don't you kick us off with part 1 and give us an overview of understanding the vertical challenge?
Well, starting with chapter 1, introduces the growth and development of high-rise buildings, both working and living environments. We point out the fact that the structural elements of a high-rise, regardless of materials used, may not withstand the assault of fire due to the antiquated standards of time and temperature, as set by an ASTM standard 119E. These buildings are not only required to maintain structural, well, let's put it this way. These buildings are only designed to maintain structural integrity long enough for the occupants to evacuate. They don't extend into the time it takes for extinguishment. That's not in the equation at all. We present a history of developing and refining policies and procedures of fire operations to what was experienced as failures and faults in building design and systems as far back as the 1980s. And then there's chapter 2. Jack can tell us about that.
Yeah. In chapter 2, we took a look at the historical perspective in the 19th century with experiences with these buildings. Back then, even then, now it's the cost of land too. Everybody wants an urban center, the development of that, the introduction of safe elevators now with odors, and the steel frames that came about for creating these skyscrapers that people started looking up and called them skyscrapers. We talk about the establishment of building and fire codes, and believe it or not, in the United States, we only started that towards the beginning of the 20th century, in the 1900s. Code trade-offs. Every time we go to a code hearing, they want to trade off because the building's, quote, fully sprinkled. And our approach in the book, in the chapters, we have to have a balanced approach, both active systems and passive systems, to help tame the fire environment. We're the ones who have this building for the life cycle. Architects, engineers write it off, they go away, fine. And building management. So those are things we looked at. The other thing, too, we hit on hard was the firefighters having an understanding of 2 different code developments, the international codes and then NFPA, 2 different processes, totally. Right. And the thing there is that we need to get more firefighters involved in these codes. We can't be relying on national people only, the National State Fire Marshals, the IFF, National Volunteers, State Fire Marshals. They all have one voice. That's 4 voices. In the ICC process, every department has a voice. New York City has 12 voices. A small town may have 4. You add that all up, it's a few 100,000 people that are not involved in the codes. So the idea here is that we went out and reached to the National Forum of Firefighters, what we call Strategy 5. Strategy 5 is firefighter risk reduction. We're all bought into community risk reduction, but the fire companies aren't buying into firefighter risk reduction. So we're trying to establish that acronym. All right. And the thing with that is that we need them to participate. We show them how to do that. And we encourage people to start hearing a little bit more about going forward. The thing here throughout the book, even though it's chapter 2, we come up with, let's put code segments in certain spots. We didn't want everybody to keep referring back to chapter 2. So if you had NFPA 13, there was a little section there. If you're dealing with photoluminescent signs, there's a little section there. Whether it was a local code or a national code. So we give them those ideas. So to me, it's fulfilling both things rather than jumping all over the book. Jerry?
Well, chapter 3 is about building construction. It provides a comprehensive understanding of the materials used to construct high-rise buildings with the use of steel and what constitutes fire protection and its limitations, like sprayed-on protection. The evolution of concrete from mortar, Portland cement, with the introduction of high-strength concrete, and how it is strengthened with either additives, rebar, and cables, as pre- and post-tension methods are explained. We advise how fire may degrade its strength, integrity, and what methods of extinguishment is recommended to include our safety from explosive spoiling and compromise. Of course, engineered wood is now being used to construct high-rise, and we express our skepticism in its use and how methods and type of connections can be compromised. We introduce to the reader the innovation of modular construction and the fact that this method reduces the time it takes to completion of a building, and it'll become more common throughout the world, to tell you the truth. The exterior envelopes of high-rise is discussed in detail. There are these buildings are encapsulated with only window glazing, some with solar panels, or covered with exterior insulation and finish systems that may in fact be combustible. We saw that with a hotel in Las Vegas. The fire service has experienced horrific events with metal composite materials used as cladding with multiple deaths, such as Grenfell Tower in London. So we discussed them and certainly what was the fault in design there with that event. Then there's chapter 4, Jack.
Yeah, in chapter 4, we go into active fire protection systems. We mentioned when the alarms are activated, what are the challenges and fears that occupants have before firefighters get there, as well as talk about actions firefighters take to control fire and smoke in the building. There are frustrations we have at times upon arrival. The panel's not reading right. We can't read it. The panel could be out of service. They never told us about it. The status of building systems upon arrival, particularly office buildings, and delays in going upstairs and that. People trying to evacuate. Does the building have a fire alarm system with a voice capability or no capability? The other thing we looked at is high-rise features, various fire command center locations. They're all over the place. Some are in desk behind the concierge. Some are on the wall behind them. Some are in rooms off to the side. Some are in rooms in the basement that have an escalator to go downstairs. Fire alarm panels, they're all over the place. How many years is it? How many companies are out there? The buttons are not all in the same spot. And they all change in cycles when the alarms go out. The little known thing is between 15 and 20 years, you had to replace everything. They stopped making parts for it. Obviously talk about sprinklers, standpipes, the combination of those, and building fire pumps. Is it an automatic start, a manual start? And the other thing too is as you take this building apart, we all see utilities come into the building, but where's the local isolation valves? How do we isolate things at the most, I would say the most heightened area that we have to deal with? And particularly when you get into the hospitals, that's another animal itself. And finally, we talk about in there briefly about fire protection system impairments. What do you know going out the door? Is the 15th floor under construction? Are the sprinklers out or anything? We will have a discussion on the solution for this in chapter 7. Jerry, chapter 5.
Jack mentioned hospitals. I don't know that there's very many books written that provide you so much information on response to hospitals. And I would venture to say that many, many departments throughout the United States, whether they be large cities or not, are responding to some type of healthcare facility and hospitals. And it would pay for them to, get a hold of this book and see what we have to offer. Now, chapter 5 is a building system as well, and it provides an insight to what building systems maintain the existence of a high-rise structure, such as the utilities, rubbish removal, and HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And what will be emphasized is smoke management and control. More people die of smoke inhalation than they do of exposure for fire. So it's about smoke management and control for life safety of occupants and firefighters. And then there's chapter 6.
You know, one thing I saw in that was interesting, because I've had several requests for it, and it's the information is scarce, is information on escalators. There's a lot of information on elevators, but there's not very much information out there on escalators. And that was, I know during my career, we had numerous incidents with escalators.
Yes, yeah. I believe John O'Donoghue wrote a chapter or two in his book.
Mm-hmm.
Dave?
Yep.
All right.
And we certainly address that. We talk about, isolating them electrically, if you will, and where to do that. And the fact that fires occur in escalators.
If you ever see underneath one, you'll know why.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
There's everything from hairbrushes to baggage to tennis shoes, small children.
The King's Cross fire in London was a tragic event. And as a matter of fact, Paul Grimwood, when he first joined the London Fire Brigade, was involved in the investigation and, let's say, the forensic research of why that fire occurred and what causes it to become so intense. It's referred to as the trench effect of, fire burning up an incline, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when you shut these elevators down with an incident in the building, they become access stairs to evacuate. You have to shut them down first in both directions.
Well, not only that, if you need to evacuate, you can shut them down and you could reverse them so that it's, for evacuation rather than, coming up, they're going down.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
The reason for chapter 6 is that there was so much on building systems. The chapter would have went too long in 5. So in 6, we talk about transportation systems and travel routes, stairs, the different styles of stairs, from return, straight, open and closed, scissor, fire towers, smoke towers, access stairs found in commercial buildings and duplex apartments. In some of these duplex apartments, if you go down, they say it's like going into a basement. Right. Elevators, particularly office space, low, mid, high-rise elevators, many banks of cars. I have elevators in buildings. When I dealt with the hospital, I had over 70 elevators in different banks, different buildings and things like that. How to break that down and make that usable for everybody. Rockefeller Center has the same thing. Communications, always been a problem, always. Firefighter radios not working, things of that nature. In some of the places that I had, I would keep 5 or 6 radios on charge at the command center so the fire department could use. I at least had building bi-directional cable in the building at that time. Now we're putting fixed bi-directional cables in the building, which is a great thing. We also passed a code on that. Any existing building that radios don't use, you can put this in. I emphasize any. It wasn't just high rises. Mm-hmm. The other thing too, this is a solution that's in the code now. The other thing is a firefighter's fire alarm control panel, 2-way voice, unutilized to a degree. We can put it out there in a 2-way voice system. That's a manual system where the alarms go out in the building and then someone gets on, like a fire safety director makes an announcement. But also firefighters can pick up the warden phones too on the floors. The other thing too, and in a lot of buildings I go into, Dave, and you know it, you have these red plug-in phones. Mm-hmm. All right. And I challenge everybody, have you used them? Mm-hmm. When I go into these buildings, I open them up and I blow all the dust off them.
Right.
So when I do the lectures and everything, I say, look, you have these phones. When you go on a call, if it's bells and whistles, take the damn thing. Go upstairs and plug it in. See if it works. Because I was told there are 2 different systems. If you plug it in and you make your announcement, you got to pull it out. They're going to see at the panel downstairs that the phone was activated on the 17th floor. If you keep the new systems, if you keep several of them in, it works. So you have to know the difference on that.
Yep. That was one of our drills we did
Yeah.
when I was a battalion chief in the high-rise districts, both Midtown and Buckhead,
Mhm.
is it was an easy one because part of the high-rise SOP was you assign a company to the elevator. And
Yeah.
so we would go, and that's what we would do for training is we'd grab all those telephone
Okay.
quarter-inch jack deals, and then everybody got to operate the key and see how it worked. Because if you don't do it, and then
Yeah.
you got to do it under pressure, uh,
Yeah.
you tend to kind of not know what you're doing. So yeah, that was a great little drill, and any building will let you go in there and do it. You know, it doesn't have to be vacant or anything. You want one that's actually working. Great drill.
And then to wrap up too, we looked at these new occupant evacuation elevators, particularly for people with disability. And that's a whole different ballgame to deal with that. It'll take a day to talk about it. But the big thing that came out was the fire service access elevator. They're taller and deeper. And the thing about this is new construction, because when we go into residential buildings, they're much smaller. Sometimes, like New York City, you can't get everybody in there. So now it's bigger, taller. You could take, I think, an 8-foot pike. We have them in several buildings in New York going forward. These new BESS systems, what I call like Tesla battery systems in the building, they're looking to shunt power, and then the batteries take over. But there's no control on this. We see what's happening with these things burning up all over the place, particularly with the mobile stuff in New York City and around the country. And last, let me end up with a firefighter air replenishment system. We've learned over years to adapt standpipes. In the beginning, we didn't want to do that. And all somebody did was think about what I call a fire hydrant on every floor for buildings. We need to totally take a look at this stuff. I'm dealing with buildings in New York City and other parts of the world, almost over 1,000 feet. Let's lose the elevator above 50. You see people going into the building, one extra bottle. But you asked me to do VES above the fire floor, maybe 17 floors or something. How am I getting my air supply? So take a look at that. I recommend everybody look at the Firefighters Air Coalition. All right. It's a leading force behind this. We're talking about cancer stuff and everything else, but take a look at this. It's much needed. And we have to take the blinders off a little bit more and go after this. At the hospital, had all sorts of air. No issues at all. Air management, everything, oxygen, medical air, so all that. Never had a problem.
Right.
Maintaining systems like everything else, guys. Once you maintain it, it's fine. So I'll stick on. I'll talk about chapter 7, and this one will be a quick one. My thing here is adopt a K by G, know before you go, practice for fire companies, gathering building intelligence for the battle spaces to reduce life safety risk to firefighters and occupants. The reader is introduced to elements of pre-incident planning, the rationale for gathering building intelligence, and its relationship to future battle plans that Jerry goes into a lot in the book. This chapter also explains the best leverage of an electronic building information card to execute the duties and assignments. After 9/11, I was asked to chair in New York City the fire safety directors because the fire department was still dealing with the operations for a long time at the World Trade Center. So we put together a task force to develop what we call the building information card. Before we went to the fire department, we knew they didn't have the capability of doing it electronically. So what we came up with was what we call a passive card. Every time you come into a high-rise office building, there will be a passive card there, what we call intelligence. Well, that has changed since then. This has now gone electronic. And electronically, we can push things out, critical data via MDTs, tablets, even cell phones. How about 30 to 60 second read? How about before you go out the door, you have 10 to 12 lines on initial operations for that building? How about having an understanding at that time, these sprinklers are out on the 17th floor? How about having an understanding that the construction is on 12 to 15 and it'll give you time limits? So these are all the enhancements we've made since then. It's just like everything else, guys. Look how long it took for us to get rid of the horses.
Yeah.
So we're trying to move as quickly as we can. Technology is running away with us. I just want to let you know that the flip phone is back.
Oh yeah.
So it's recycled.
A flip smartphone.
Yeah. So the idea here is that this stuff is available. People have to get on board a lot more. They're just dragging their butts. And the other thing too, we connected all the dots in every code out there talking about building information cards, everything. And know what the problem is, Dave? They don't enforce the code.
Right.
That's it. That's our mistake.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's there. These people sacrificed out there to make these things work. Jerry, you're up for part two.
Well,
Part two, command and firefighting unit responses.
Before we move on to that, I'd like to mention what's also profound in Chapter 7, and it was also a concept that Chief Murtaugh brought forth, battle plans. And some people might think that we stole this concept from Vinnie Dunn because he speaks about battle space, but that's really not the case. Battle planning is also the future of the fire service, in that what we're talking about, building information and things like that, pre-incident plans, pre-fire plans, that is static information. Well, what battle planning provides is, let's say, tactics based upon fire conditions, and we explain those fire conditions in levels 1, 2, and 3, so that everyone is on the same page, or we understand exactly what the conditions are up on, if it's a fire, the fire floor. A level 1 fire is a fire that can be extinguished with a water can, an extinguisher, or one hand line. Now, let's say if we're stretching one hand line, it's a given there's going to be a backup line, so we'll just set that aside. But a level 1 fire is not only a fire that can be extinguished with a water can or one hose line, it's also fire, smoke, and tenability. So it would be the level of smoke that would not migrate past the area of origin, level 1. A level 2 fire is a fire that's going to require the flow of 2 hand lines. Granted, there's a backup line, but the flow of 2 hand lines and the smoke is definitely going to migrate outside of that area, that floor. A level 3 fire is one that's going to require the flow of master streams. And of course, the smoke condition is going to infiltrate the entire building. So we have these levels. And then based upon those conditions, the fire plan will give them and suggest the attack stairwell and the evacuation stairwell based upon the location of the fire on the footprint, the floor plate, if you will, of that given floor. And in the plan, it shows a footprint. We have a diagram of the floor, and we break it up into quadrants. From what would be the main entrance to the building would be the A side of the building, A, B, C, D. Well, going around the clock, right on, let's say, the left-hand corner front is the A quadrant, the B quadrant being above it, C and D. Based upon the quadrant, we'll know the attack stair and the evacuation stair, and it also tells us if there's any disabled persons either in that area, on the floor above, or in the zone. So that's important to Chapter 7 now.
One other thing, Jerry, in Chapter 7, is I mentioned like 30 to 60 second reads of these things. These are called QAPs, quick action plans. And these are things that were driven out of the National Fire Academy. When I dealt with Bill showed us, they were teaching that in command and control classes. The idea here is that I don't need all this information at once. Like I mentioned, what do I get going out the door in those things? So it is important that I don't want to give too much overload. The other thing, too, is that electronically, when you have these all hazard threats, you're dealing with the police department. How about the police department for active shooter in these buildings? How about go into the electronic version, hit the 16th floor, and the floor plan comes out? So you see all the layouts and everything else. It's cross agencies. OEM could use this. All right. So the idea is the silos are out there of information at a unified command. Open them up, and we can share them across, breach them across the different agencies that are responding to these things now more than ever before as a united group.
Perfect.
Jack had mentioned Bill Chiotis working at the Fire Academy. He was a chief with the Philadelphia Fire Department, and most certainly they experienced their tragedy with One Meridian Plaza. Now, Part 2 starts off with Chapter 8, Command, which really is a deep dive into the mentality and domain of an incident commander, detailing the complexity of commanding challenging incidents, not only within the command structure, but also how an incident process system evolves to ensure life safety, fire control, smoke management, mitigation of all hazard emergencies. What is defined are the resources needed to assist the incident commander to a successful outcome that includes building systems, building staff, and the technology of today, which we're discussing right now. Unique to this chapter and book is an examination of the intellectual conditioning of command and what can be considered dysfunction, believe it or not. We touch upon that. Now, chapter 9 is unit company operations. It really provides a detailed synopsis of how the incident process system is organized and functions with fire units, specialized teams, sectors, and/or domains. It will provide a perspective of how fire units by type function to accomplish the mission. The reader will also be enlightened to the concept of ventilation profile. Now, that was a term really introduced by a chief up in the Ottawa Fire Services, Ottawa, Ontario, Peter McBride. And now ventilation profile is part of our lexicon, to tell you the truth. Ventilation profile, which really is inherent to the airflows within a high-rise building and its influence on smoke management and control. The use of battle plans and how they are used as a guide to operations will be presented in Chapter 8, incorporating disciplines, use, and control of stairs, elevators, and buildings systems consistent with safety and generally accepted good practices. And then there's Chapter 10, Jack. Talk to us.
Yeah, Chapter 10, the vertical challenge of different occupancies. For this edition, we concentrated on office, residential, institutional, and mixed-use occupancies. It includes a wide variety of different occupancy problems and solutions that have challenged the firefighters in these high-rise buildings and may continue to test fire departments well into the future. The reader will find what I call each occupancy some common response issues, as well as specific issues for life safety for these occupancies. So some of the things are definitely life safety, communication, setting the tempo, location of the fire alarm activation, elevator car operation, water supply, fire and smoke conditions, as well as operations and smoke management. And also what's there is the use of transportation modes for what we call TIP evacuations. TIP stands for total in-building relocation, P for partial, S for shelter in place. For an office building, typically the alarms go off. In New York City, they evacuate the fire floor, the floor above, the floor below. In some parts of the country, they evacuate 5 floors. All right. The idea here is that that's for fire. But who looked at all hazard threats? Totally different. Now, with all hazard threats, depends upon if the threat is interior or exterior. I can use elevators.
Right.
Start using elevators. Now, how do you get that into the scheme of things? The suggestion in the book was that if you're using elevators for evacuation, all right, we take the fireman recall key, bring it down, and go into independent mode. All right, and the rationale for that, if this is what they call a 2-level attack, all right, they go in and they do shoot 'em up, and then they're starting fires in the building like they did in India. That smoke detector for that elevator lobby will recall it to the floor. In one building that I went into in Boston, they had a riot button at the fire command center. What the hell is that? If there was an active shooter in the lobby, they hit that. The elevator wouldn't come down to the lobby. All right? It would go up to the 2nd or 3rd floor, which is good. In New York City, I looked at some. They were calling them down to the lobby. I said, why? Well, the doors are closed. Yeah, but there are 2 other things you didn't do. What's that? You didn't stop the light, indicator light from blinking up or down, and you didn't shut off the voice communication that at the elevators here. So those are 2 little things that, again, you miss. You make a decision for something, but did you totally get the solution for it? All hazard threats inside and out. So they asked us after 9/11, me and the late great Jimmy Ellison, we worked for Kroll Associates with Jerry Howard and Commissioner Howard, ex-commissioner Bratton from the police department. They want us to fully evacuate a high-rise building. They're not designed to be fully evacuated. They're not. 44, 53-inch stairwell. They're not. If they were, your sports arenas and stadiums would have 30-foot corridors, stairwells, with several bars and banisters in the middle and 8 to 10 doors at the bottom. You're asking me to come down a 43-inch stairwell with one door at the bottom. The other thing, too, is talking to people about how does a stairwell get jammed up? Jammed up. All right. How about what we call the stopgap method? Every time the door opens up on a floor, the people that are coming down have to stop. And that's continuously all the way down. We rectified the situation with the lights going out with photoluminescent markings. We sat on a committee in New York City to put that out there and how to make that work once the lights go off and everything. But these all hazard threats are many. Interior of the building, exterior of the building. How do you quickly move people out of that? In the fire, we asked everybody to stay to the right. I just learned the other day that that's wrong. They should stay to the left going down. It's closer. They have a better grip going around and just taking their hand in the older stairways around the post at the landing and grabbing on down. On the older stairs, that banister stops at the first step. They think that's the platform. It's not there.
Right.
So we're still learning these things as we're going through stuff. So Jerry, I think you were in that class when they with the
Jake Pauls.
Right, Jake Pauls. It's good stuff. How about scuff marks on the stairwell coming down? You can take a look at Pascocello, if I get that right, Jerry.
Pascocello.
Pascocello. He said, next time I go into the high rise, I got to start looking at those scuff marks coming down. These are issues in stairwells, total issues. And again, they're not designed to be fully evacuated. So for today, with all these things, I'll just pick on a little bit about mixed use. All right. And again, extensive different mixed use is basically two or more things in the building. Some of these buildings require a dedicated fire safety director on site with one focal point for fire department arrival. One focal point. Some of these areas might have their own fire alarm panel.
Right.
Depends on how big it is, but they all have to report back to the command center. In some cases, that's not the case in some of the buildings I've been in. And again, these threats to these buildings, all different types. But safeguard here is the thing with these buildings is to have a dedicated fire safety director. You need to have things in place that someone's totally looking over all these fire protection systems in the building. Jerry dealt with that at Columbus Circle. I dealt with it at Rockefeller Center, at New York Hospital, things of that nature. These complexities are just humongous. They really are.
One of the problems I always ran into responding to high rises was, especially after hours. During normal hours, it was okay. If you had the building engineer there, I mean, they're usually top notch and they know what's going on. But after hours, the contract security folks become the keeper of all the information, and they don't know anything. And by the time they get trained up on it, then they change personnel or they change companies. And that's a big flaw in the system there. When you got the security, they don't even know where keys are. And obviously you get the perfect scenario. The fire control room is near the loading dock, but the fire alarm panel is behind the concierge desk, and then the keys, the elevator box is somewhere else on the lobby floor, and it's a constant battle of knowledge on the building employees. So it's important that they follow those standards, that they have to train those employees to be able to know where that stuff is. Just basic familiarization.
Yeah, and in some cases, you bring up a good point about the third party that they outsource. In some of the buildings I've been in, they wouldn't even invite them to building meetings.
Right. Yeah, because
really?
they're just security guards.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll wrap it up with chapter 12.
Thank you. Well,
looking ahead.
What you mentioned? No. We're not moving on, Jack.
Okay.
We're going to talk because he brings up, let's say, a great point. After hours and weekends, for the very fact that we emphasize smoke management and control throughout the book, almost every chapter, because again, more people die of smoke than they do of exposure to fire. And on a weekend, the building engineer is not going to be the A team; it's going to be the B team. The point I want to make here is, and we talk about it in the book, of course, that the fire service and those that will become incident commanders, they have to understand or have a basic knowledge of what HVAC systems can and cannot do, whether they could, shut down a particular floor, pressurize the floor above or below, or the zone above or below. To say, if the building engineer on a weekend is not intimately versed on the operation of that building, the incident commander can then convey what he expects and what he would like this engineer to do with the system. That being said, Chapter 11 is a rather unique chapter. I don't believe there's anything written on buildings, let's say, that are under construction, being renovated, being alterations, or being demolished. And we refer to that in the book as buildings being born, sick, and dying. But this chapter is so inclusive, it really discusses all the resources that the fire service needs to take a look at when a building or a site is being put together to construct the building, meaning you even have to take a look at the infrastructure, the water supply. I mean, you can see what the situation that's happening out in California right now. The water system really couldn't provide the amount of water they needed, for these mass fires. And some construction sites throughout the country have been conflagrations so mass that buildings in close by were threatened, if you will. So, I mean, you have to take a look at the infrastructure, and that includes water, electric, even waste for that matter. The Burj Khalifa, believe it or not, the waste from that building is trucked away daily in tanker trucks because the infrastructure doesn't exist. But in any event, we talk and discuss and detail all the resources. First of all, the relationships you have to develop with the contractors that are performing the construction. Build a relationship of trust and, let's say, exchange what they can provide you and what you're providing them, because most of the responses to construction sites are in fact emergencies, and it's people falling off ladders and stuff like that. So we discuss all of those resources on site, even the cranes that may help. And I know your department down in Atlanta has rescued people from construction sites, put them in stoke baskets, and brought them down to a ground level, utilizing the crane. So we talk about all of those things: outside elevators, freight elevators, and such. So it's all inclusive. We even go into asbestos abatement. And most certainly we discussed the tragic event that happened at the Deutsche Bank building in Manhattan. So we go into that in detail. And it would be very enlightening for anybody, not just people that are interested in high-rise. I mean, just that chapter alone is enlightening, because construction, it's coming to your city. It's coming to a theater near you. Let's put it that way. And then there's chapter 12, the future. Isn't that correct, Jack?
Yes, chapter 12, the future. The other thing, before I get into that, just to let you know, also in the book, we also have many appendices of things that we have out there, like what does the fire safety director do before the arrival of the fire department? There are other things out there, guidelines for high-rise operation worksheets, things of that nature, and also lessons learned. Besides Jerry and I and Jim talking about it, we've invited other authors to come in and tell us their lessons learned on things too. So that's inclusive in the book. In chapter 12, we're looking ahead for new tall building designs and techniques. The vertical cities of the future are challenging small towns with tall buildings, and even large metro areas with becoming mega cities. Right? All I see in New York City now is 987 feet up. They're up to, I think, 1,400 feet already. They're not into what they call mega tall, but they're getting there. Those things. Urban challenges with designs, new technologies to improve health, offer luxury, and provide energy efficient buildings. New technologies for building construction materials. Jerry hit on that a little. Methods and materials. I just sent something to Jerry the other day we talked about. They're filling concrete with these large thermoplastic balls. All right, so they don't have to put that much concrete in there. The thing was that if it's 4 inches, how much do you have exposure now once the ball takes up that space? Going from 4, you have 1 inch at the bottom, 1 inch at the top. Things to look at with some of these buildings. Yeah, they're saving some stuff. But now these are all the challenges we have. And I think Jerry told me that there's a building in Brooklyn that's like that already. Improvements to energy efficient buildings, totally. In one building, rather than having the HVAC coming out of the ceiling, it's coming out from the floor. Cogen furnaces now that high pressure gas. Once you open that how would I say in maintenance of it, they open it up and everything. You find there's a jet engine inside there.
Yeah.
So, elevated hoisteways now coming over 2 separate cars running in the same shaftway. It's not the double deckers, 2 separate cars running in the shaftway. Fire protection systems, new, particularly moving and controlling smoke. Remote control and robotic nozzles now, particularly now with these ACM cladding on the outside, like you've seen in Grenfell and other places, can have what they call fire dynamics in the whole building. And looking further into, we have the drones on the outside, but maybe small unmanned aircraft applications for the inside. So those are some of the things in the book at this time. I'd like to ask Jerry to close out the chapter with smart cities and smart firefighting.
I tell you what, and I'm not going to say that that's the future, but most certainly it is. Cities, they're being referred to as smart cities because they're looking at, traffic flows, the use of electricity, and where the demands are and things like that. But as far as smart firefighting is concerned, again, we could use the building systems to see what's going on. There may be a time that we could enter a building and take an iPad or an iPhone and copy a Q code that would give us access to either their building management system or a system that was built on building information modeling. It's referred to as BIM, B-I-M. And the building information modeling program is one where you could look at any floor on the building in 3D, even to see where furniture is located, but we could be there for an emergency, a broken water pipe or something like that. And it gives us the actual location of the valve where we could isolate that particular problem. And these, again, like hospitals, you have oxygen, nitrous oxide, pneumatic lines and things like that going through the building. As a matter of fact, they go through a space above the ceiling, which is referred to as the interstitial space. It's not referred to as a plenum. And it could be a space that could be 15, 20 feet tall that when you do access, you're walking on catwalks and things like that. So being able to, for an incident commander, to look at a floor and even be able to see the layout, he can give his units direction and guidance from the lobby as to where to go. So smart firefighting is on the way. Artificial intelligence, of course, there's going to be someone, and it'll be on the floor at FDIC this year, that'll have some sort of a program that has artificial intelligence that, let's say, will be recording transmissions on radios and will be calculating and giving advice to an incident commander. But yet it's the incident commander's knowledge and experience that's going to make the final decision. It's not going to be artificial intelligence.
Right.
And that's a fact. As a matter of fact, artificial intelligence is going to be reading our book to make themselves smart in the future. But chapter 12, it's still evolving every day, the world around us, and we have to be prepared. And hopefully this book is going to provide that.
I haven't seen it. And of course I've been retired for three plus years now. But when you were talking, I was just thinking about my cell phone and the Ring doorbell, and I can log in and see live. These building engineers should be able to control the building systems from home.
Oh, they do.
They do. You can see it now. Yeah.
Yes.
So that would have been.
places such as like a Home Depot, in these big box stores and chain stores, the HVAC systems are controlled remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like AI. It knows what the conditions are outside, inside, and it does it automatically. But yet,
Good
for
stuff.
we need to vet that building and what's going to be available to us. In other words, we may not always have to cut roofs. We may
Right.
be able to use the building system.
Yeah, to remove. What do you guys think? Just off the top of your head, what are one or two of the most common mistakes, or it could just be not even a mistake, but just ignorance on our part as the responders in regard to the high rises?
Well, I say it's a lack of disciplines, and it's the disciplines of performing a function of knowing where you're going and what we have. In other words, when we arrive, if there's a fire alarm panel, you have to go to the panel. Many residential buildings do not have that. So, of course, we're looking for information from people that may be in the lobby, so on and so forth. But the alarm that turned you out to begin with could, in fact, have been the activation of an automatic alarm, which could be anything from a smoke detector, heat detector, to a sprinkler, water flow.
Mm-hmm.
And it may have said it was activated on the 12th floor, but when we arrive, when we look at the alarm panel, it's now showing that alarms were activated on 11 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't look at the panel. You could very well be taking an elevator to what you considered a target floor, a safe floor, and it's not safe at all. And then it's the use of elevators. Elevators with fireman service, all of those disciplines. Looking for visuals. When you arrive to a fire floor from a stairwell, just take a look at the conditions. In other words, the door leading into the public hallway or leading into the space, do you see smoke coming from around that door? And if you do, it's possible that, okay, it's under pressure, or maybe a window failed. In other words, we're starting to get visuals and we have to look for them rather than just going out aggressive and wanting to, get a piece of the fire. In other words, it's a lack of disciplines is the big mistake.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I see is, particularly when you're dealing with fire command centers, and they're all over the place. There's some standards there, but take a look and see what other things they have connected there. About security cameras in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Utilize those more than ever before. I dealt with a 3-block area. And Dave, you and I, at the end of the month, we call them about super blocks and hospitals. They have one command center, and the alarm comes in. I'm on 70th Street. The alarm comes in on 60th Street, 68th Street. Before I get there, put the camera on, particularly the garage. Let me see what I have. Utilize those. The other thing, too, is that a couple of pet peeves. One, we put in a firefighter smoke control system. No one knows how to operate it. What the hell I put it in for? No one touches it. Before I left the hospital, I said to him, I need you to give me how to operate this thing. And I posted it inside the fire alarm panel. This is how I dealt with toggle switches back then. And the third thing, and this comes from Murtaugh, we keep going to these goddamn buildings with guest-based knowledge. You just know, get in the front door, look at the panel. You don't know anything else about the building. You're going from some experiences. How about flipping that and make it more decision-based knowledge on your strategies and tactics? And it comes back to what I keep saying, building intelligence. Building intelligence. Tommy LaPola, when he had the helicopter go down, Jerry, with the fog in New York City, was left with a standpipe that broke on the penthouse roof floor, all right, coming down the stairs. He knew right away that there was another one in the other tower. Some stairs only have one, but there was two. But again, more information. He said, the first thing I got there went for the building information card. So does the 9th Battalion chief when he had the fire about 4 months ago, building under construction. All right. With a fire starting, it comes in there on 14 and 15, the alarms are going off. Well, by the time they found it, it was all the way down on 9, I think. And it was illegal construction. They took out an elevator car and made it a storage room. It was all the papers in the storage room. again, it wasn't up to date. So
Yep.
the more you get into this stuff annually, and it's a target thing, once a year in January, it gets updated.
Good stuff, fellas. Well, that'll wrap us up here. I want to thank you guys for your dedication, hard work. I know a lot went in to this book, and even though there's 3 authors listed, there's probably hundreds of people that somehow contributed knowledge and experiences and advice. You both are true lifelong learners and teachers, and this book's going to be around a long time as a resource for a lot of industries, not just the fire service. So thank you for joining us, and glad you guys are friends, and I've enjoyed the long-term experiences we've had over the years, and I'm looking forward to many, many more. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Remember, every day's a training day, and this one is in the books.